going on, everybody? Happy Thirsty Thursday. Another edition here of Mean Streets Lavender FTN Network YouTube page. Chris Meaney here with you. We have a Thursday night football game. I think they're going to try to play football tonight in Pittsburgh. We do have a game to talk about briefly. We have some starter sits and a couple props for this evening as well, and then we'll be out of here. If you guys have any starter sit questions for Week 14, I know it's a big week here. This is the last week of your regular season before playoff time happens. Hopefully you have a bye. Hopefully you're locked in. Hopefully you don't need anybody to get fantasy points in this game for your team to punch yourself a ticket into the playoffs, because we have a total here of 30, which is the lowest since the Patriots and the Bengals played in Week 15 in 1993. 1993. This is the lowest total game here tonight since 1993. Yes, Bats. Patriots also in that game against the Bengals. They beat Cincinnati 7-2. 7-2 in 1993. I don't know. I mean, I was alive, but I definitely wasn't making any football bets. But I do remember hitting my first pro line in 94. I had the Islanders. I had the Florida Panthers over the Montreal Canadiens. Ended up winning like $84 as like an 8-year-old kid. I got my grandfather to make the ticket for me. I said, go pick up this ticket. I like these 4 hockey games, and I've been hooked ever since. I will sprinkle a little bit on some props here tonight, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. There's 13 games on the ice tonight in the NHL. Recorded Dangle Bets Elliott earlier. This is a night to sit back, watch some hockey, get a couple picks, right? We got the free article over at ftnbets.com, win some money with a couple props, hopefully. I mean, I'm going to watch this game because I'm a true psycho, but does anybody truly care? Like, Patriots fans are checked out at this point of the season. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I suppose if you're a Steelers fan, you're just looking for something to happen here offensively. The Patriots are coming off a game where they were shut out 6-0 to the Los Angeles Chargers, one of the worst defenses in all of football, and they couldn't score any points against them. And the Steelers are coming off a game where they lost to the Arizona Cardinals. We have locked in the under 4.5. So Arizona is one of the worst teams in football. The Chargers are one of the worst defensive squads in football. Last week, we saw the Steelers lose to Zona, and then we saw the Patriots 6 points. I mean, good on George here. He didn't even know what players to put on the board here for tonight. He's like, I don't know any of these guys. Like, none of them are good. They're all on the waiver wire here. You got Bill Belichick, of course, what he's done. And then you got Mike Tomlin. So 2 Hall of Fame coaches, 2 GOATs. The total here, as I mentioned, 30, 2-10 New England Patriots, all but checked out. The defense has been playing so good. Like, the defense has been really good. Like, if you have New England tonight for a defense in a deeper format, I know they're only 26% owned. They've been all right. Like 5, 8, 5, 11, 6 points. Like, these are fantasy points over the last couple of weeks. I mean, they allowed 6 points and lost. They allowed 10 points to the Giants and lost. They allowed 10 points to the Colts and lost. This is a team that has allowed 10 or fewer points over the last 3 games, all losses, and they've yet to score over 7 points in a football game since week 9. It is not good in New England. I don't think that Bill Belichick is done. If he's done, it's because he wants to be done in New England. Like, say what you want about some of the draft picks, and I'm sure that's a big thing that maybe will be talked about in the offseason in New England, Mac Jones. And I mean, you can go back to the past decade, really. Like, there haven't been a lot of fantastic draft picks in New England. They need to figure this thing out at the quarterback position. They're going to have a top pick. They'll see what happens, what they get for a quarterback. They can't continue with Mac Jones. Unfortunately for them, Ramondre Stevenson, which is their best player, is not going to play tonight. He may be done for the season. We'll talk about Zeke in a little bit. Devontae Parker, they signed to a 2-year extension in the offseason. Tyquan Thornton's shown us a couple things, but not a lot. I'm trying to think of the wide receiver they drafted real early, almost like 7 or 8 years ago. It was on the tip of my tongue and I forget it now, but he was a bust. The draft picks have been very questionable for Belichick and company, but the defense is still legit. It's really good, and that's why we're getting a total here of 30. On the other side, the Steelers defense is good too, despite last week against the Cardinals. They have given up some big explosive plays, but they can certainly get after the quarterback and dial up some pressure. Joey Porter Jr. He looks like he's going to be an elite corner in the NFL as well. So I know 30 is just so low. Our NFL betting model has this as like an 18 to 15 type game. I have to pick this in my own pool. I think that I'm going to lean with Pittsburgh here -6, but it's just so tough to actually put bucks on this, because how can you trust New England to win this game, or Pittsburgh to win this game by a touchdown? And can you just back New England to cover it because they can't score any points offensively? So man, this one's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess. I'd say that, you know what? I think we'll see New England hang tight and maybe cover this game. I think it's going to be a field goal game. I can't put money down on Pittsburgh to win by like a touchdown. I do have a lean to the under. I joked on Monday, like the 32.5 felt like 32.5 too many points. I think we'll see some sort of, man, we could even see like a 10-6 game. We could see a 14-13 type football game. A defensive score or two would probably get you over the 30. It's really such a low number. I don't ever like recommend over 55.5. And then when we get these low 30s, there's another one too, and Cleveland and Jacksonville, which is right around this mark. Najee Harris looks like he's good to go. I just can't really see either team moving the football all that much, and maybe just leaning on the ground game. We got Mitch Trubisky under center here for Pittsburgh with Kenny Pickett sideline. So pretty ugly football game. I'll lean with Pittsburgh winning the game. I picked them, in our FTN fantasy picks. Have a 1-game lead on Mr. Ratcliffe. He's not catching me. Come on, Jeff. You're not catching me, man. I don't care what you think. You're not catching me. We're both on Pittsburgh. We're on Pittsburgh as a group here tonight. Like I said, I would lean with the under, but where I want to go tonight, where I want to put some of my bucks down is Zeke. Ezekiel Elliott, this is his backfield here now in New England, unfortunately, with Ramondre Stevenson sidelined. Last week, 17 carries, 52 yards. He caught 4 passes for 40 yards. So there are 3 props that I have in the bet tracker for Ezekiel Elliott, and 2 of them are 2-unit plays. The one that you don't see on this board, over 15.5 rushing attempts at -130 over at FanDuel. The 17 carries last week, as I mentioned, this is his backfield. They have nothing to show for at the quarterback position. Zappy probably will offer a little bit more than Mac Jones has offered. I mean, his passing yard prop is absolutely bonkers too. Like, I've never seen anything so low for Billy Zappi. I got to find it. I thought I saw it at like 128. I'm pretty sure I saw that last night. And I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to do that. Like, I'm not getting involved with this. It's 154. It's so low. I'd say he probably, I don't know. I don't even think he'll get over that. It's obviously a stay away. But back to Zeke. This is all about Zeke here today, okay? Zeke, 20 plus carries. I think you can ladder him up. I'm not certain that he's going to have like a super efficient day carrying the rock. I think it could be another 18 for 54, 55. I think you could, if you wanted to sprinkle something on like 20 rushing attempts for him tonight, an alternate attempt line, maybe 75 rushing yards, get some plus money in your life. But ultimately, I think that the attempts are going to be there for him. He's always been a decent pass catcher. Like, it's declined in his game, over the past couple of years in Dallas. But this season here, I mean, he checks in with 2+ catches in 4 straight games, 15+ receiving yards in 3 of the 4 games. And just Ramondre, what we know is Ramondre is the lead. Ramondre is the guy that is catching balls out of the backfield. He has been, dating back to last season. But take the over 15.5 rushing attempts, -130 at FanDuel. We'll take the over. I like the other 2-unit play for me is the receiving yard prop here at 15.5 receiving yards. This one here is also over at FanDuel, I believe. Caesars, -115. Other books have them at 16, 17.5. And then the 2.5 catches. The 2.5 catches we put in last night, I think at -115. It's now getting bet. The number is moving considerably. It's -140 now. Wow. Just before I got on here, this is what we had it in last night. These are the numbers. You get notified right away when you have FTN bets. You get the betting package. You're in our Discord channel. You get a little bit of alert. We talk this thing out. So the receiving yard prop hasn't moved. We like that one. and the over 2.5 catches at -120 is what we had in the tracker. Now it's moved to -140. I would still bet that -140. I think he ends up with like 3 or 4 grabs, lives in the 30 yards here. George showing his cat, which I think we should show the people here in a second. Do you want to show the people? Oh, he's gone now. I want to share the projections for Zeke and what we have for him. I don't think, according to Ratcliffe and the projections here, that it would show a big edge. So this is just really on me. Yeah, we have him for 3.1 catches and 21.9 receiving yards, right? I would bet anything up to 17, 18 and a half. I may do some alternate stuff here with Zeke. As I said, 20 carries, maybe 75 rushing yards. I'd say if they get near the goal line, he's a guy that's going to score, but I just don't see a lot of points. I don't know if that one's worth your time. But 20 rushing attempts, I think you can ladder up to maybe 75 rushing yards, maybe 25 receiving yards or something like that. We have him for 13.9 carries for 52.9 rushing yards, but I just think he's what I mean, lean on him, right? You're New England. You got the inexperienced player at the quarterback position, turn the ball over all the time. Just lean on him. He's going to run into walls. That's going to be the problem. With the pressure that Pittsburgh's going to dial up, he's just going to run into the line of scrimmage almost every play. But he may bust 1 or 2. That's why I'm going with the catches, the receiving yards. But I definitely think he's going to live in the 16 to 18 attempt range here tonight. Say what up here to the crew. Yeah, you guys have any questions? We'll get to these ones in a second. We have a couple of starters. This was it. Thank you, Joe. N'Keal Harry. That was what, a 4th overall pick? I mean, that was a draft where there was some other decent wide receivers in that draft too, right? I forget it now. I kind of want to look it up. You're spot on. Like, that was at the time, I get it, but certainly a bust for sure. That was what draft was that? Was it just he wasn't 4th overall. He was drafted at the end. Yeah, I'm on the bats here today. That was 2019. Man, it feels like such a long time ago that draft happened. I got to take a look at it. Bear with me. Let's talk this one out here for a second. NFL draft 2019. Yeah, that was the Kyler, Nick Bosa, Quinnen Williams, Devin White, 5th overall, Josh Allen, Jags, Josh Allen, Hawkinson. All those are all pretty good picks. Josh Jacobs, 24th overall. So yeah, N'Keal Harry went in the last round of that draft. Hollywood, Marquise Brown was the first wide receiver taken in that draft at pick 25 to the Ravens, then N'Keal Harry. But after that, Deebo Samuel in the 2nd round, pick 36. AJ Brown to the Tennessee Titans, 51st in the 2nd round. Mecole Hardman bust. DK Metcalf, that's right. That's right. Those the Eagles draft JJ Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf. Deontay Johnson. So DK Metcalf, last pick in the 2nd round. Deontay Johnson, 2nd pick in the 3rd round. Also had Terry McLaurin there in the 3rd round. I thought there was one more wide receiver. Hakeem Butler jokes. Gary Jennings Jr. Riley Ridley. I remember having Riley Ridley on a dynasty squad. Hunter Renfrow on the 5th. Pretty good. Yeah, anyways, N'Keal Harry. Thank you, Joe, for that. And thank you for the Eagles drafting JJ Arcega-Whiteside. But they ended up getting AJ Brown. So meant to be. This feels like a sneaky over game. I don't know. It's just so tough. I just, if you get a defensive score, it probably will go over, but I don't know. I got to lean to the under. I think it's, like I said, I think it's like maybe a 14-13, 14-10. Bet first TD, first TD on both defenses. Yeah, where's the first touchdown going to come from? I would pick a Steeler. I would pick maybe Pat Freiermuth, or it does sound like Najee Harris is going to play. I like Najee Harris last week over Jaylen Warren. This one here could be a Jaylen Warren. I suppose, like, the guys that you would start in this, like, you may be in a tough spot and you have to start Zeke. I'm starting him in a couple of leagues, but I'm in very, very difficult spots. Like, it could be a flex play for you, but he is still outside my top 20, 23 at the running back position. I don't expect a whole lot. Like I said, our fantasy projections in a half point setting have him up for 11.7 fantasy points. If he scores a touchdown, you run. You're just happy with what you got. There's no other New England Patriot that I would even consider starting. And on the sorry for dropping the mother fruitcakes on you. No, you're good, man. You're good. You don't need to apologize. On the Pittsburgh side, I'm not starting Pickens. This is on my bench, just kind of wasting away as a roster spot. And played him last week. It wasn't great. Freiermuth, I could see you playing Freiermuth. And Deontay Johnson, I guess I could see it as well. But he's like a low-end wide receiver 3 for me. Again, I just don't see a whole lot happening in this game. First touchdown, and get some odds here. I'd take a shot on the defensive score on either side. Why not? I mean, it's a low total game. It's good defenses. It's poor quarterback play. Like, this is pretty much as bad as it gets. Remember, like a few weeks ago when we talked about the quarterback matchups? I think this week is even worse. I mean, you have Hurts and Dak, and then Mahomes and Allen going at it, but everywhere else is like backups across the league, right? The college football committee would just ban everybody in the AFC. Like, in no way any of these teams would make the playoffs because they're without their quarterback. I want to get to before I get to some touchdown props, there are a couple others that I do like, but I'm really just riding on Zeke here tonight. It's where a lot of my units are going. A lot of my bucks are going tonight. I do want to say Pat Freiermuth at over 26.5 receiving yards, I think is a touch low. 2 weeks ago when he returned, he had 11 targets, 9 grabs, and 120 receiving yards. And then last week he had 3 catches on 5 targets for 29 receiving yards. He's got 16 targets in 2 games. The 2.5 catch prop is juiced. It's at like minus 152. So Vegas is kind of thinking that Pat may get 3 grabs. And I think if he gets 3 grabs, I think that we will see him get this number. We have him for 29.5 receiving yards. So no board for this one. Just want to get you the exact number. And then, yeah, he's 26.5. 26.5 minus 115. That's over at Caesars. Minus 20 over at BetMGM. A couple other books have him at 28.5. So you can get that number, 26.5. Stay away from the juiced minus 154, 3 grabs. Bet Rivers is hanging minus 190 for 3 grabs. I'd say he catches 3 passes, right? I think he catches 3 passes and he gets in the 30-yard range. The other guy, Deontay Johnson at 42.5 is kind of low, but if you're looking for more, I would add that, but I would just go Zeke and Pat. And then I wanted to mention Parker to you guys because on this show last week, we did have Devontae Parker at over 2.5 grabs, and we had him over 29.5 receiving yards. His receiving yard prop, again, is pretty low at 37.5, but I think it's a risky play. It is a low number for a guy that over the past couple of weeks, I mean, 9 targets, 4 grabs, and 64 receiving yards. So he's clearly the one there in New England. There's nobody else really stepping up. So he probably hits the over on this mark, 37.5. So if you're looking for like a 4th or 5th player, or I'd say Zeke and then Pat, and you're looking for a 3rd or 4th player, you got Deontay in there and then Devontae Parker. But he is going up against Porter Jr. and he's legit. Like this guy he's going to be a stud in the NFL for years. It's like his dad. But I'd say he does get the over 30, and he's 37.5. Let's see what Jeff has Parker for here today. I thought he had him pretty low last week, and I saw an edge. So we have him for 41 receiving yards. So we have him just a touch over that. So Zeke attempts, Zeke receiving yards, Zeke catches, Freiermuth receiving yards, Parker receiving yards, and Deontay Johnson receiving yards if you're looking for a little bit more. But let's not get carried away here, guys. Like this may be the worst football game you've ever watched, unless you watch that 6-0 game between the Chargers and the Patriots. I was actually at a Patriots game when they scored 0 points a couple of years ago. We went on a football trip every year, and we booked the tickets before Tom Brady was suspended. He had the 4 games for the Deflategate. So we didn't even get to watch. I think the backup at the time was Jimmy G, and he was hurt. So we saw Jacoby Brissett versus Tyrod Taylor for the Bills, and it was 12-0. There wasn't a touchdown scored at all. Nothing. I remember hearing on the PA at the end of the game that it was New England at Gillette Stadium was the first time at Gillette Stadium where they got shut out and hadn't scored any points, and they announced it, and then everyone started cheering. I don't know why. I was booing, but they were cheering, and I didn't really care who won the game. I just wanted to see some bloody touchdowns. Okay, that's all I got here for tonight. And oh yeah, I wanted to look at some touchdowns. If you guys want to take a stab on first time touchdowns, I'd say like anytime touchdowns. I'd still think Najee, as I mentioned last week, Najee was ahead of Jalen for me. But this matchup here, I mean, the Patriots don't allow a whole lot on the ground. They don't, and they could turn over to Jalen a little bit because they've both been pretty decent. Like on the series show, I referenced this too. that heading into week 13, the running back that had the most 15-yard runs in the NFL was Najee Harris. And Najee Harris has dominated all the touches inside the 10, inside the 5. Like, we've all seen Jaylen Warren look pretty good with the ball in his hands. He's explosive. He's been the one that's he's got a couple dump offs and a couple catches. Trubisky can tuck and run. Is he going to dump it off as much? I don't know. I'd say both backs are like flex worthy plays here for you tonight. I'd say Najee's the guy that would get the touchdown. I'd say like Najee, Pat Freiermuth, and then I'd lean Zeke on the other side. But again, like small sprinkles here, guys. We have a total of 30, and I do have the lean to the under here. But for a first-time touchdown, Najee's plus 550. Warren's also plus 550. Zeke is 650. I think Pat Freiermuth is interesting at 10-1. No touchdown at 14-1. Oh man, I don't know if I've ever seen that as high before. 14-1, no touchdown. Man, it's not even great odds. Steelers at 22-1 for the first touchdown, and the Patriots at 35-1 for the first touchdown. Those are 100% worth your time for a sprinkle. New England, 35-1. Pittsburgh 25-1. Defense first touchdown. Oh my goodness. And I think, you know what? No touchdown at 14-1. That may be worth your time too. I mean, what's George saying to me? Can I play a video? Yeah.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
I may be your best work yet. You always top yourself, but that's pretty good. So yeah, we're just dropping F-bombs here on Mean Streets, and it's totally worth it. I think it was totally worth it. Steelers and Patriots tonight. We may have to clip that, man. I think you should clip that, timestamp it, 22-minute mark. What is this garbage game that we're gonna watch here tonight? Okay. Oh, it's good. Okay, before we get to actually just have some starter sits for you guys, and I can answer any questions there. Tomorrow we'll have some picks against the prop, some picks against the prop, picks against the spread. And we'll have some props and some touchdown calls for you guys as well. The show will be a little bit later. In fact, I'm thinking about going live Saturday after the Sirius XM Fantasy Show. I'm away tomorrow. I booked it off. I have a hockey tournament. A charity tournament. I'm going to play like 4 or 5 hockey games, and I am going to be on the bats. So I probably won't be able to do a show tomorrow evening, but we will have something. It'll be quick, like some props and some picks against the spread for you guys. But I do want to have some, and I get it. I always say this, it's all about context. Just the 2 teams on bye this week. You definitely have some options. I understand that everybody's in a situation where they have to win football games or fantasy matchups to get into the playoffs. We want to help you get there, right? We want to help you get there. Lineups are basically set for the most part, but you may be in a tough spot. I don't judge anybody's fantasy teams. I have some brutal ones out there as well. So we'll see what we can do here. So these are really players that are in. Some of them are kind of obvious. Like I tried to leave some obvious plays off the board, like Brock Purdy to see on start lists. Like, guys, we're starting Brock Purdy. We loved Brock Purdy. We talked about him, the quarterback 22, 23 in draft day. We're like, man, this guy's going to be a top 10 quarterback. What are we doing? And not only is he a top 10 fantasy quarterback and he's ranked as a top 5 guy this week, he leads the NFL in completion percentage. He leads the NFL in passing yards per attempt. He leads the NFL in quarterback QBR. So he's on his way. Like he's back in the MVP conversation for the 3rd time. You're starting Brock Purdy. Any questions that you have? But start Brock Purdy. I'd even play him over Justin Herbert, right? It's like all those yak monsters. He didn't throw the ball down the field once. Not once against the Eagles did he throw the ball down the field. And I'm talking like a 20-yard pass down the field. And he still ended up with 4 passing touchdowns and over 300 yards, right? These monsters from the Looney Tunes are happening here in San Fran. Week 14. These are players that would start with confidence. Jordan Love up at the top. He's racked up 18 plus fantasy points in 4 straight games. Averaged over 20 fantasy points over those 4 games, thanks to a 10-2 touchdown interception ratio, at least 2 TDs in each one of those 4 games as well. And he's a good bet to toss a couple more touchdowns this week against the New York Giants. He's also averaging 19 rushing yards per game. So it's almost like starting with half a touchdown. He's had a couple games with 30 rushing yards. I needed to see it last week against a good defense in the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, I was impressed that he did it against Detroit. It was impressive he did against the Chargers, but those defenses haven't been playing good over the past few weeks. The Chiefs defense has been playing great all season long, and that was the most points scored against Kansas City all year long in Jordan Love in terms of an EPA type of game. That was top 5 for a quarterback this season. So Jordan Love, ladies and gentlemen, as the Packers inch closer and closer to locking down a playoff spot. 2 touchdowns in 4 straight games and a good bet to toss a couple more against the New York Giants. We have Russell Wilson against the Chargers. This is a tough spot for the Broncos, the second game in a row on the road. But this is a really good matchup against the Chargers. 7.8 yards per attempt allowed. It's the third most. The Chargers have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and they're top 10 in passing touchdowns allowed. Russ only has 2 games, 20 fantasy points, but he's been consistent. He has 15 plus fantasy points in 10 of his 12 games, 21 touchdowns versus 7 picks, 30 rushing yards per game, the most that he's had in 3 years. You got to go back to like the 2020, 2018 days when he was running around like this. He's got 30 plus rushing yards in 7 games this season, including 4 of his last 5. We were all over him in the prop world last week at over 5.5 rushing attempts at plus money. He had 10 rushing attempts as well. And we're starting Courtland Sutton. We were a year too late, I guess a year too early on this Russell Wilson to Courtland Sutton connection. My goodness, I had so much Sutton last year. I actually have a little bit of Sutton this year because Jerry Jeudy was getting drafted early and Sutton was getting drafted late. You can't start Jerry Jeudy, but you certainly can start Courtland Sutton. As I mentioned with the Chargers, giving up a 7.8 yards per attempt. It's the 3rd highest mark in football, the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers, 13 touchdowns to wideouts as well, which is tied for the 5th most. Sutton has 9 touchdowns on the season, only 3 games without a score, just 1 game without a score since week 5. So we're starting him. The other quarterback here that may surprise you a little bit, it's a super flex play. We'll get into some quarterbacks that would play over Jake Browning in a touch, but Browning against the Colts. It's a very, very small sample size, but through the 2.5 games that he has played, he has a 75% completion rate. Now, again, a very small sample size, but he was very, very impressive against the Jaguars in his second NFL start. He had 27 fantasy points, 354 yards and a touchdown. He ran one in. He has 70 rushing yards, just over 70 rushing yards in the 2.5 games that he's played. Jamar Chase is making plays for him. T. Higgins is back. These Colts games tend to go over the number, 39 plus points in 11 of 12 Indianapolis games this season. Both defenses are leaky. The Colts and the Bengals among the leaders in giving up big plays through the air. And I think we'll see some offense in this game. It could be a fun, fantasy-friendly game, even though we're down to 2 backup quarterbacks in Jake Browning and Gardner Minshew. But I'm starting Jake Browning in super flex leagues. I'm interested. I'm intrigued. There's a lot of bad quarterbacks out there, and I think he can. Finish as a top 15 guy this week. Austin Eckler against the Broncos. Obviously, you're starting Austin Eckler, aren't you? Well, he's been held under 7 fantasy points in 3 straight games. He hasn't topped 67 rushing yards since week 1. He is still catching balls out of the backfield. His Chargers are favored at home. You can run on the Broncos. The defense has been much better in Denver lately, but they still have allowed the most fantasy points to running backs in a league high 5.2 yards per carry. This is the lowest I have ranked Austin Eckler to date this season, but I still have him as a top 15 running back. I wonder how healthy he is. There's a possibility if the Chargers lose this game that they just shut him down as he looks for a new contract. But I would play him and hope you get a vintage Austin Eckler game to punch yourself a ticket into the fantasy football playoffs. Keep an eye on Aaron Jones. If he doesn't suit up, I think he can roll out A.J. Dillon as a low-end RB2 or a flex play. Dillon hasn't done anything sexy over the past couple games, but he does have double-digit fantasy points in 4 straight games in a PPR setting. He is catching a few passes out of the backfield. Over the last 2 games, 32 carries, over 100 yards, 4 grabs in the last 2 games without Aaron Jones. The Giants, the 7th most fantasy points allowed to running backs, 18 rushing touchdowns on the season, the 2nd most. So maybe, just maybe, A.J. Dillon could run through mud and find himself in the end zone. The Giants have also allowed 4.8 yards per carry, the 2nd most on the season. How about Tajay Spears as a little bit of a flex play on Monday Night Football? It does sound like Derrick Henry is good to go against the Dolphins, but Miami, they're 14-point favorites here. And if you go look at the back of the football card with Derrick Henry, in games where they lose significantly, he doesn't touch the ball a whole lot. In games where they lose by a score or they win, he's getting 15, 16 plus carries. Spears racked up 75 yards on 16 carries last week when Henry left the game, and he caught 4 passes on 6 targets. He has 33 catches this season. And even though he hasn't had a lot of attempts on the ground. This is a game where, as 14-point dogs, most likely playing from behind, is Miami has just ran up the score all year long. They're record chasing. They want 2,000 yards for Tyreek Hill. Devonta Chan is getting carries at 4th and whatever. They're trying to get everybody, their records. They're trying to get 2 MVP, trying to get Tyreek, potentially MVP at 2,000 yards. Miami's pedal to the metal. They're going to score as many points as they can in this game. For Tajay Spears, at least 4 catches in 3 of the last 4 losses that the Titans have had, and 5 of the last 7 losses Tennessee has had. Spears has at least 4 catches. It is a risky play. I think him and Keaton Mitchell are decent flex plays, but I think if you're in a PPR league, Tajay Spears is interesting as a flex play. If you have Derrick Henry, make sure you have Tajay Spears. If there is no Derrick Henry for whatever reason, Tajay Spears is going to have 20 plus touches. Henry's not the guy that's going to be playing on third down situations when they're down 2 scores, right? They're gonna have Spears out there catching a couple passes, some garbage time stuff, and he has shown us multiple times that he is very explosive with the ball in his hands. Rashee Rice against the Buffalo Bills. This is a potential league winner. We've talked a lot about Rashee Rice all year long. Finally, it's happening for him. 19 targets, 16 grabs, 170 plus receiving yards over his last 2 games. He's got 5 touchdowns on the year, and it's a high total game against the Buffalo Bills. So I'm starting Gabe Davis as well. Very boomer bust, right? 6 games with 18 plus fantasy points. 4 games with 18 plus fantasy points, 4 games with 1 or 0 fantasy points, 6 touchdowns on the season, but it really is 1 or 0 fantasy points or 18 plus. It's big game Davis here. Big game Gabe Davis. Lenarius Sneed, should be on Stephon Diggs. So we could see a couple pass attempts from Josh Allen, who's playing good football, minus the picks. Forget the picks. He's playing good football. And this is a high total game where I think we'll see the over hit. And he's not here as a start because he had 4 touchdowns in a playoff game against the Chiefs, but he did have 4 touchdowns in a playoff game against the Chiefs. I'd be willing to take the boom here this week, rolling the dice on the high upside game that we could get from Big Game Dave. It's like Big Game Gabe, but I call him Big Game Davis. That's it, Davis. Let's go Big Game Gabe. That's what it really is. Brendan Cooks against the Eagles. Darius Slay limited Cooks to 1 catch for 7 yards when Dallas and Philadelphia played in week 9. He is going to see a lot of Darius Slay again this week. Darius Slay did a good job against Ayuk last week. The Eagles are going to have no answer at all for CeeDee Lamb or Jake Ferguson. But since that game where Cooks was kind of shut out, he has 3 touchdowns and he's racked up over 300 yards on 20 catches. That's like a 4 or 5 game sample here. Dak is rolling. They've averaged nearly 40 points per game at home over the last 14. They've almost scored 40 points in every single home game this season. The Eagles secondary giving up some massive, massive plays this season. So I would play Brendan Cooks. If you're looking for a flex play, a dart throw here today. You got some injuries heading into week 14. How about Elijah Moore? Joe Flacco and Elijah Moore carried over some of the chemistry that they had with the Jets to the Browns in their first game together in Cleveland this past week. Elijah Moore picked up a season high 12 targets and 83 receiving yards with Flacco. Based on volume alone, I think Elijah is worth a flex play. Amari Cooper is likely out. It's some sloppy weather most likely in this game, some wind and some rain, but I think the volume speaks for itself. So Elijah Moore is like a low-end wide receiver 3 or flex play for me this week. Jake Ferguson, you're just starting with confidence. He's an obvious start, a top 5 tight end for me. I like him more than the consensus. When he played the Eagles earlier in the season, he had 7 catches, 91 yards, a touchdown. The Eagles can't stop tight ends. They're top 10 in fantasy points allowed to the position. They've allowed 6 touchdowns to tight ends, which is 1 off the league high. And Ferguson has 4 scores in his last 6 games. Also desperate at the tight end position, Taysom Hill is an option for you. Keep an eye on the practice reports heading into the week. Hill, a top 10 tight end for me this week, 4 rushing touchdowns over his last 6 games. Derek Carr's banged up. He could run one in, lean on as a runner, leaned on as a receiver. He's lined up as a wide receiver more than any other position. He really is a weapon. He can toss a couple into the end zone. He can catch a couple in the end zone. But when they get near the goal line, they have been leaning on him as the goal line back in this offense. Not Jamal Williams, who led all backs last year in red zone rushing attempts and rushing touchdowns. He has a whopping 0 on the season this year. And a big part of that is because Taysom Hill is running them in. All right, there's a question here. Rather play Eckler or Mostert in a 12-team PPR, Cup, Higgins, or JSN? Oh, man. Cup's in a tough spot, man. And he's got to see Kyle Hamilton, too. The Ravens only allow 5.5 yards per carry, but I got to play him over those other two guys. I can't trust Higgins and JSN. Although a good game against Dallas, I don't think I'm playing him this week against the Niners. I would play Mostert in a 12-team over Eckler. I would play both Miami backs over Eckler. I know. It's gross. It's even gross. It's so, but Mostert just scores every week. That's it. I mean, he really does. It's that simple. He scores a touchdown every week. They're 14-point favorites. He's probably going to run one in. I know touchdowns are hard to predict, but at the same time, like, he's just running one in every week. Our projections say for you to play Eckler, if that means anything to you, Mark. I don't want to confuse you. But I think if it was my team, I would be playing Raheem Mostert. We have him for 12 points and a half points, and we have Eckler for 14.6. We have Eckler for 49 rushing yards on 12 carries. We have him for 32 receiving yards, 4.2 carries. We have him projected for 0.49 rushing touchdowns. As for Raheem Mostert, we have projected for 0.51 touchdowns. I put him like 0.65, 0.7. We have him for 11 carries for 57 rushing yards, and we have him for 2 catches on 15 receiving yards. So we actually have him projected for more rushing yards than Austin Eckler. And it's just you're in a PPR setting, so I could see, Eckler over him because of the catches. I personally would play Mostert, man. That's kind of where I'm at. This offense has just been so hot fire. There's another question there from Kyle. Superflex PPR. I have Trevor Lawrence, Pickens, Spears, Downs, and JSN. Neo wide receiver 3, flex and superflex. Also likely versus Goddard, and Minnesota versus Indy DST. Please and thank you. So I don't know. Trevor Lawrence is probably not going to play. I don't think he's going to play. I don't think there's anything concrete yet, but I think he's going to miss some time. I would play Downs over Pickens. I know it was a dud game, but I'd like the environment in Cincinnati. I think they were going to see more points. It was on the over 38.5. I think that total's jumped up to 43.5 right now. I just can't trust Pickens and the Steelers offense, and I just don't want to play JSN against San Fran. So I would play Downs, and Downs is your wide receiver 3. You need another guy. I probably would lean JSN there in that scenario. And then if you need another one, like it'd be Spears, I would roll the dice with Spears over Pickens. And then I don't know what you're doing at the quarterback situation, but you need to find something there. T-Law, if T-Law plays, I'd play him, but I just don't think he's going to suit up. And I would play likely over Goddard. Get into Goddard in a second, but first game back from a fractured arm. He's had 2 good games all year long. I would play Goddard. I would play likely over Goddard. Just risky, right? There could be a hit, a setback. He could be very, very limited, right? He could just be on a snap count, a pitch count. So I would just play likely here. And then Minnesota against the Raiders or Indy against the Bengals. I would lean with Indy against the Bengals, even though I like the over. I think some pass attempts there. Could be some sloppy football. The Vikings defense is just, I don't know. It's just not good enough. Raiders coming off a bye. I like Meaney to win the game, but I'm going to lean with Indy there. Quarterback at -4 for interception, -1 for a sack. You don't have any other quarterback options by the sounds of it, right? You're just playing Trevor Lawrence or some of the other guys there in the flex spot. Okay, let me get to some players that I would sit. At least they're in some tough matchups. You may have to play some of these guys, but these are players that I would sit in week 14 if I could. Matthew Stafford, nearly 50 fantasy points over his last 2 games. The yards have been there. The touchdowns have been there. He's got like 7 scores. But a matchup here against Baltimore, 5.5 yards per attempt. It's the best mark in football. It's the best mark in like 20 plus years. 60% completion rate to opposing quarterbacks is the 5th best mark in football. The fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Baltimore is number 1 in DVOA defense, number 1 in pass DVOA defense, according to football. According to FTN bets. I almost said Football Outsiders. DVOA, Aaron Schatz, he's an FTN guy. Number 1 in DVOA defense and number 1 in pass DVOA, according to FTNbets.com. If you want to beat Baltimore, you lean on the run game. Kyron Williams, I expect this to be a game where he touches the ball 20 plus times. I would play Puka over Kupp. Kupp's like a wide receiver 3 for me, but it's a very, very tough spot. We've seen some good teams go into Baltimore and get smacked. Seattle was doing things offensively. They didn't do anything in that game. Detroit was doing things offensively. They didn't do anything in that game. The Ravens defense is absolutely legit. Another obvious sit here, Geno Smith against the 49ers, coming off a season best 31 fantasy points last week, 334 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Unfortunately, he gets San Fran again. He had 8 points against the Niners in week 12, only 180 passing yards, 0 touchdowns and a pick. And I wouldn't play Tyler Lockett either. There's just no consistency in Tyler Lockett's game. It does look like JSN has passed him in the pecking order over the past couple weeks. I would play Jackson Smith-Njigba over Tyler Lockett, but I don't think either of these guys are good matchups or good plays this week in tough spots. DK Metcalf can handle anything. It could be a dud game, but, he was on a lot of sit lists last week against the Cowboys, and, he popped off, and the ceiling is extremely high for him. Joshua Dobbs is the other quarterback that I would consider sitting in a super flex league. Sure, I could consider playing him. He does have 5 interceptions in his last 2 games, only 8 fantasy points last week. He is getting Justin Jefferson back, which is great. He's got great weapons in TJ Hawkinson and rookie Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. If he does struggle in this game, though, he could get benched. Like, that is a real possibility that he could get benched if he tosses a couple picks early. So I think it's a risky play, decent super flex play, but a sit in leagues with like single quarterback leagues. I have him outside my top 20 at the quarterback position. CJ Stroud in the tough spot, would play him. Russell Wilson, playing him. Brock Purdy, we know, top 5 quarterback. Jordan Love, yes. Jared Goff, even on the road, yes. Gardner Minshew, yes. Jake Browning, yes, I would play over him. I would even play Jameis Winston against the Panthers over Joshua Dobbs, but I would play Dobbs over Matthew Stafford, Desmond Ridder, Adrian O'Connell, Will Levis, Joe Flacco, Bryce Young, Tommy DeVito, Mitch Trubisky, CJ Beathard, Billy Zappi, Zach Wilson. My goodness, there's a lot of bad quarterbacks out there. So I get it. You may have to play Joshua Dobbs, but I'm not playing his running back, Alexander Madison. Nuh-uh. Under 8 fantasy points in 3 straight games and 5 of his last 6. This guy is just not efficient enough. He's only scored double-digit fantasy points in 1 game since week 5. Ty Chandler's getting a little bit of run there. I don't care. It's against the Raiders. I'm not playing him. He needs to score a touchdown for you to have get a decent showing from him. And I think he only has 1 rushing touchdown all year, if that. Singletary against the Jets, week 10 and week 11, 40 fantasy points combined, 2 touchdowns. He had 52 carries, nearly 300 rushing yards. He filled in great for Dameon Pierce, but since Dameon Pierce returned 2 games, Singletary has 14 carries for 54 yards, just 8 carries last week. And Pierce had 15 carries for 41 yards, and he scored a touchdown. He is the goal line back. He's the back to lean on. And he's a bigger back. He's built he's built for, carries and for running between the tackles. And this is a potential sloppy weather game with some wind and some rain. The way to beat the Jets is not to drop back and throw the ball 45 plus times. It's to lean on the ground game, but with both of these guys, but I would play Dameon Pierce over Singletary, and he is the goal line back. Should they get inside the 5, they'll lean on him a little bit more. I don't see this as a game where Singletary can rack up 3 or 4 catches, so I will play Dameon Pierce over him. All the Chicago running backs are a sit for me. It sounds like Deontay Foreman's set to return. I would avoid all of them if you could. Khalil Herbert only 6 carries in week 12. The last time we saw the Bears, Rashawn Johnson had 15 touches, but there was no Foreman. So with Foreman back, this is now a 3-headed monster, which is the ceiling is just not that high, and it's against Detroit, and they've been really good against running backs. If you had to play one, it actually would be Rashawn Johnson, on like a gut feeling that they'll turn it over to him, as they already know what they have in Foreman. They're headed for a top pick. They just drafted Rashawn Johnson, the running back of the future. Let's give him some more touches. But if they get inside the 5, Foreman's going to be the guy to pound it in, if not Justin Fields. Kareem Hunt against Jacksonville after 5 games in a row with a touchdown. Hunt has only racked up 12 fantasy points over his last 3 games. He has some top 55 rushing yards in a game this season, and he's just got 1 catch over his last 2. So it's been a rough go for Kareem Hunt, not getting the goal line work, and I don't know how many goal line attempts they'll have this week against the Jags. Adam Thielen, man, what a run. It was a really great run, but he's cooled off of late. 5 fantasy points in his last 2 games, under 10 in 4 of his last 5. The Saints have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Jonathan Mingo is trending up as like a dart throw. Of course, I would play Adam Thielen over Jonathan Mingo, but if you need somebody, I would play Mingo over a guy like T. Higgins, for example. Big name, but unfortunately, things are just not working out for T. Higgins and the Bengals offense. I don't think he can be trusted. 3 grabs on 3 targets in his return. I would play Jamar Chase. I get it. I like Jake Browning as a flex play this week, but I'm not playing T. Higgins in my lineup, and I'm not playing Chris Godwin. When Chris Godwin played Atlanta earlier in the year, he did rack up a season-high 12 targets. It was the first matchup. They were going to play each other again, but he only had 6 catches for 66 yards, and that's kind of what he's been doing all year. There's been a lot of floor games. There's no ceiling games so far for Chris Godwin. He has 1 receiving touchdown. He had a rushing touchdown last week, but he didn't have a catch last week. 3 targets and 0 grabs. I'm a little bit concerned about Baker and the Bucs offense this week, but I do think they'll squeak out the upset. But it's been Mike Evans and a lot of Rashad White lately. Dallas Goedert on here, as I mentioned earlier, first game back, he suffered the fractured arm against the Cowboys. He got the Cowboys this week. He's only had 2 good games this season, could be on a pitch count. I know that he thought that he could have played last week, so he's probably good to go in terms of like 65 plus snaps, but you just never know. And there's some other options out there for you at the tight end position. I think that can help you out. And then there's Tyler Higbee, my bad. Don't go chasing touchdowns here with Higbee. He's got 2 on the year. They came in 1 game. The Ravens, we just talked about them earlier. We're not playing Stafford. We're not playing Higbee. You probably got to play Puka Nacua or Cooper Kupp, but I don't think we'll go here. I mean, the 6th fewest fantasy points allowed to tight ends, Baltimore, 5.5 yards per attempt is elite. This is my tight end rankings, just to throw them out there for you and kind of give you a feel of Goddard. Kelsey, Laporta, Hawkinson, Kittle, Kincaid, Jake Ferguson, Taysom Hill, Cole Kmet, Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Isaiah Likely, Kyle Pitts, and then Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth after that. So I do have Goddard down the list pretty high, pretty low, and Ferguson is a top 5 guy for me. Actually, Kelsey, Laporta, Hawkinson, Ferguson, Kincaid, Kittle. But you're starting all of those guys, right? And I understand that you may have to start Dallas Goedert. You may have to. Like, I would play him over Conklin and Kraft and Juwan Johnson and Higbee, Brevin Jordan, Hunter Henry. Like, I'm playing them over all those guys, Kate Otten and Conquil. Like, I'm definitely Conquil's been okay, but I'm playing him. I'm playing Goddard over some of those guys. All right, that's it. I think we're out of here. You have Josh Allen as your QB1. Yeah, I mean, you need to. Yeah, Josh Allen's your QB1, right? But you need somebody else in that super flex. I don't think Trevor Lawrence can play. Alex in the house, Pollard for Javonte and DK. Oh, still trading, eh? Interesting. Yeah. Since Noah Brown's your flex, DK would be at flex over Noah Brown. It sounds like you're going to have a more balanced team here into the fantasy football playoffs. So, yeah. I would do it. Javonte's in a good spot this week against the Chargers. Get the Chargers twice. Pollard's he's been okay lately, a little bit better because of touchdowns, but he hasn't been super efficient running between the tackles. He's got some tough matchups coming up. He's got Detroit. This is a tough one this week against the Birds, and then he has he's got the Bills and somebody else. So I think that's a pretty decent return there. Javonte, I know it was really high on Javonte, and it's been kind of disappointing, and I do apologize for telling everyone to draft Javonte, but man, we got him in the 8th or 9th round as like our 3rd, 4th running back. He's been okay. I don't even think he's really had a ceiling game. He's had a couple 17 fantasy points and 19 fantasy points, but he is getting a bulk of the touches, which is nice to see. He's catching some balls out of the backfield. He's got 29 grabs. He's got 3+ grabs in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of 6. The 2 games here was 27 for 85 and 21 for 79. And then I was confused about the mini 11 for 37 is a good rush defense, but 18 for 65, 13 for 46. It's got a really tough spot. A couple of tough games, actually, like Detroit, New England, but it's a good 2 for 1. I think, you get that Chargers game week 17. The Detroit one is tough, but he could do enough through the air. And the New England one, they've actually been really good against running backs, and especially yards per carry. But it's a game where they should win and maybe get some sort of goal line touchdown. Having said that, not 1 rushing touchdown for Javonte Williams this season. He has 2 receiving touchdowns. But if you go look at Pollard, it's pretty much the same thing. Of course, he's a little bit more explosive through the air, and he has scored rushing touchdowns in 3 straight games, but he only has 5. He doesn't have a receiving touchdown, which is pretty surprising as well. And he hasn't topped 80 rushing yards just once since week 3 against Arizona. But you get that upgrade for Brown, right? Brown over DK over Brown. Yeah, I agree, JP. I like the 2 for 1 there. No worries. We're here to help. We're here to try to help. Should I start Jalen Warren or Raheem Mostert? I would start Mostert. It sounds like Najee's going to play. Williams 6XX in the house. I would start Mostert. I have a hard time sitting him. I don't care how inefficient he's been or not efficient. He's got 14 rushing touchdowns. He's got 16 total. The guy has scored a rushing touchdown in every game but 3. One against the Eagles, he didn't score. Against the Raiders, he didn't score. And against the Bills, he didn't score. He was 7 for 9 in that game. I think he may have left with an injury in that one. But he's got 14 rushing touchdowns. And he's linked to a team that they're 14-point favorites. They score 30 points with their eyes closed. I love the 7.5. I love the 14. So I would play Raheem Mostert, dude, and just hope that you continue to get a touchdown from Mostert. I know Devon Achane is getting some run, and he's going to get some run as well. I mean, that guy has the ability to bust one every time he touches the ball. But I would lean with I would go with Mostert, and I'm going to I like to share the projections with people. So you have my take, and maybe the projections are on point. Jeff Ratcliffe's won awards for this kind of stuff. So I want to share with you what I have. So it's almost like a little bit of security there for you. Raheem Mostert, we have ahead in our projections with 12 fantasy points. We have Warren for 10, Najee for 10. We have Warren and Najee side by side, but Raheem Mostert, 11 carries, 53 yards, and then 2 catches for 15. So easier chance to score a touchdown. What else do you have here? Should I start Kelce or Likely and Higgins or Gabe Davis? I would start Travis Kelce, man. I know it hasn't been the best season for Travis Kelce. We're really starting to see the injuries with Travis Kelce. I'm a big fan of the New Heights podcast. I love those guys, man. The #1 sports podcast this year on Spotify. They've had a really, really good year. They talk a lot about many things, but they dive into a lot of the football aspects of their game, how they're feeling, what they're seeing. And Travis Kelce has talked about defenses playing him tighter this year, bracketing him, tripling him, other wide receivers needing to step up. We've seen some injuries, which have kind of slowed Kelce down. He's not getting as much separation, but you can't sit him. You just can't sit him in a game that we have over 50 points as a total. He's the best tight end in football. And even though, it's not what you're getting from him is not what you got from him in the past. It's just really tough to sit Travis Kelce, dude. So I would play him, and I would play Gabe Davis in the same game, a high total game here. Gabe Davis has been very boomer bust. He's either 18 points or 1 point or 0 points. We've seen that multiple times. I think 4 games with 1 or 0, 4 games with 18 plus. We tripped up over the big game Gabe here, but this is one. We got the 4 touchdown game from him in the playoffs a couple years ago against the Chiefs. L'Jarius Sneed is going to be on Stephon Diggs. I think this might be a good one for Gabe Davis. And Higgins has had 1 or 2 good games, 3 catches last week, no Joe Burrow. So I would play Kelce, and I play Davis, man. Hit that like. We do appreciate you. I think we're going to get out of here. We got week 14 here. I can run through some more starter sits for you guys if you want some early stuff, but I'm going to be back for another episode before the rest of week 15 or 14 gets underway with some picks against the spread, some props, and some touchdown calls. If you're just joining the show, I see some more people popping in. We're in on Zeke today for some props. We like the over 15.5 rushing attempts. It's a unit play for me. I like the over 15.5 receiving yards. It's a unit play for me also, and the over 2.5 catches at -120. I do think Pittsburgh wins the game, and the under, I know it's really low at 30. I see like a 14-10 type game. I think in my own pool, in my own spread pool, I may actually go with New England to cover the 6 here tonight as maybe a field goal game. The Patriots defense has been really good. They haven't been able to score points. And the Steelers offense hasn't been great. They just lost to Arizona. It's tough to back a team to cover when they just got shut out. But I think the Thursday night football games have historically been low scoring, a little sloppy, some surprises as well. Maybe this is a field goal game here. So I think that's where I'm at. The Steelers should win this game by like 14 points. Like, come on. You're in a playoff spot. You're at home. You're going against a team that hasn't scored more than 7 points in like 4 games. Like, they should take care of business today, but they also have Trubisky under center. It's not an upgrade over Pickett. It's an equally bad scenario. But this is where we're at. I also gave love to Pat Freiermuth at over 26.5 receiving yards, Devontae Parker at over 36.5 receiving yards, and Deontay Johnson at over 43. But I'm really just in on Zeke, and I like Pat Freiermuth. As for the rest of week 14 here, we talked really already about some of the start and some of the sits here, so I don't think I'll go into it in too much detail, but I'll maybe just kind of rapid fire through it. If you're just joining, you can go back like 15, 20 minutes and I'll have a time code for you where I gave some start and sits for the week. But Jacksonville, if I had Ridley, I'm playing Ridley. You're playing ETN and Evan Ingram, of course, but the Browns are good against tight ends, and Ingram finally scored. We actually called that here on the show on Monday for him to finally score a touchdown. But it's it's CJ Beathard. It's sloppy weather. I think you got to keep an eye on the weather across the board. It looks like wind and rain in Cleveland, in New York, in Baltimore, in Cincinnati, and another sloppy weather game too. I think potentially the Giants. So across the board, it looks like a lot of wind and a lot of rain. Detroit, you're playing everybody on the Detroit side of things. Chicago is DJ Moore. That's really it. Tampa, it's Mike Evans, Rashad White. Atlanta, I'm not crazy about London or Pitts. And playing Bijan. Really only feel good about Bijan there. You're playing Nico Collins, I think, no matter what. Now, he is going to see DJ Reed. And Noah Brown's probably going to have to deal with Sauce Gardner. I think we're going to see CJ Stroud struggle, especially if it's windy and rainy. That's why I liked Pierce, certainly more than Singletary. Lean on the ground game. That's how you beat the Jets. I'd play Garrett Wilson, but, I have Garrett Wilson a couple spots, and my leagues are almost dead. But I would play him based on pure volume. I would try to find other options for Breece Hall. He was a sit last week. I like him a little bit more this week. But Robert Saleh came out, kind of called him out, and we saw a little bit of Dalvin Cook last week. So he's not anywhere near top 12 running back for me. But you play Nico Collins, the rest of the way, he should get a lot of volume, a lot of targets, but tough spot for him this week. I would try to sit every Carolina Panther. Chuba Hubbard's coming off a good game. He's probably going to get 15 plus touches. You're not playing Miles Sanders. Jonathan Mingo's trending up. Has to be a deep league there for you. I would sit Adam Thielen where I could, but I would play him over Jonathan Mingo. On the State side of things, you're playing Chris Olave. Taysom Hill's a tight end. You're playing Alvin Kamara. The Rams, like Stafford, try to find some other options, even in the super flex league. I play Puka over Kupp. Kupp's got to deal with Kyle Hamilton. Tough spot, man, for the Rams. You're playing Kyron Williams, getting a lot of touches, some catches there. Baltimore side of things, I do have Gus Edwards ranked ahead of Keaton Mitchell, but these guys are side by side for me. We saw Keaton Mitchell pop off the last time we seen the Ravens, so now it's a bye week. Is this a trend? That's something I'm going to keep an eye on here because I think he could be a league winner. Gus, the goal line back. But Gus was limited to snaps. So I think Keaton Mitchell, he's shown us that he's extremely explosive with the ball in his hands. It could be a change of scenery here out of the Ravens backfield as we inch closer to fantasy football playoff time and real NFL playoffs there as well. And likely is a top 12 tight end. The Colts, I'd still play Downs. I got him as a flex play. It's been a couple disappointing games. Volume's been there. Last week it wasn't, as opposed to week 12, but it's still play him. Pittman, you're rolling out. Jamar Chase, you're rolling out. I liked what I saw last week from Joe Mixon. And the efficiency wasn't there for Zach Moss. I have him as a low-end RB1. I mean, you got to love the touches. I try to sit both Seattle backs. Charbonnet, I don't even know is going to play. Ken Walker, you got to keep an eye on that situation. I play DK, and that's pretty much the only Seahawk I'd play. JSN over Tyler Lockett. San Fran, you're just playing everybody there. Minnesota, you're playing Justin Jefferson. You're playing Jordan Addison. You're playing TJ Hawkinson. I'd try to sit Alexander Madison. Find another option for Dobbs if you can in a super flex league. I'd play Devontae Adams, play Josh Jacobs. The Bills, I'm playing everyone. You're playing Diggs, play Gabe Davis, play James Cook, catch a couple passes out of the backfield like his receiving yard prop this week. The Chiefs, Rashee Rice. You're playing Mahomes, obviously, and Kelsey. You're playing these guys, and Pacheco's been awesome. For the Broncos, Cortland Sutton, I wouldn't play Jerry Jeudy. Touchdown machine, good matchup for the Chargers here. If Joshua Palmer does play, I'd maybe consider him as a flex. It could be on a pitch count. It's risky. First guys coming back off injuries is really, really risky. Eckler, we already talked about him earlier. The Eagles, I would play DeAndre Swift. I think they're going to lean on the ground game here a little bit. He's fine. He's good to go. Let's run the football, Philadelphia. This is what you guys do best. Lean on the offensive line, slow the pace down, get some long drives, keep your defense off the field. They played a lot of snaps over the past couple of weeks, record-setting back-to-back weeks in terms of snaps, like 96 in that Bills game overtime in short weeks, and teams have been resting and waiting for Philly. I like the Cowboys. I'm playing Cooks, even though Slay shut him down. I'm playing Cooks. I'm playing Ferguson. CD, they're going to have no answer for him. You're playing AJ. You're playing Devontae. I'd sit Goddard. And, of course, you're playing two quarterbacks there. Huge game in Dallas this week. Green Bay, looks like Watson's out. I like Jaden Reed more than Dobbs, but I play both of those guys. AJ Dillon, we talked about, if no Aaron Jones. Only giant I would play, and I don't even like it, is Saquon there. Jake tried to talk me into Jalen Hyatt. I mean, he's drinking the bats. Tennessee and Miami. playing everybody in Miami, right? Points galore there. They're just running up the score. Tennessee, Hopkins, maybe some garbage time stuff there. And I think Tajay Spears is interesting as a flex play for you guys this weekend as well. Are we concerned about Pierce taking targets away from Downs? Alec, that is. Yeah, it's been a couple weeks, but for the most part, it has been Downs. I mean, we'll see if this trend does continue. I think I would play Downs over Pierce if I had the choice between the two. And even for Downs, and I don't like him as much as I have over the past couple weeks. I think he's a flex play, really at best. We don't have him projected too high. I'll give you guys some bubble wide receivers that would play over Downs. Let's just kind of start at Rashee Rice. Yes, even though Thielen is a sit in a tough spot, I would play him over Downs. Garrett Wilson, Jaden Reed, Brandon Cooks. I don't love Lockett, but I would play Lockett over him. Don't love Drake London, but I would play Drake London over him. Play Romeo Doubs. I play Elijah Moore. Play Gabe Davis, Jordan Addison, and then I would get into Josh Downs. I probably would play Godwin or Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson over Josh Downs. And I know I mentioned Godwin as a sit, but I mean, the volume has been there, some of the targets. So I was doing a little bit more than Josh Downs, but not yet. But it is something, Kyle, that we need to keep an eye on and trend, see if it trend for sure. One more, Steelers or San Fran. Oh, good one. Really good one. I got San Fran ranked ahead, dude. Then the Steelers. I want to share the projections with you again. The Steelers are our number one defense, so I'm not gonna be able to talk you into that. Man, it's the way that the Niners defense is playing. I get it. It's New England. I don't think you can make a bad choice. These guys are 1 and 2 for me. Like, I have San Fran 1, Pittsburgh 2. I have Houston 3, Miami 4, and then the Ravens. Oh, man. I think that I would play San Fran. I don't think you can make a bad call. Steelers get some pressure on the quarterbacks. The Pats can't score any points. Why don't you just roll with the Steelers? I think it's fine. I think either way, I think you're fine. I just wanted to see what they did against the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, man. My gut does tell me San Fran, William, 6XX. Against Seattle, week 12, they had 6 sacks, a pick. They had 13 fantasy points. And it's, you're seeing a team the second time in a 3-week span. Usually these division games, they kind of go another way, or it's a little bit tighter the second time around, but the Niners are just rolling. They're going to score points. They're going to get Seattle in situations where they have to pass, and the running backs are both dinged up and they can't run on San Fran. So my initial feeling is actually San Fran, but our projections say for you to roll out Pittsburgh, but I'll leave that one up to you. But I would be playing the Niners because I think the ceiling is higher with San Fran, but the matchup is A+, as you're well aware, this week tonight against the team they call the New England Patriots. I've heard they won some Super Bowls, but not this year. All right, I'm out of here. Have a good one, guys. We'll talk to you this week, and we'll have some picks and some props and things like that. If you're looking for some more stuff, ftnbets.com. I have a free article over there, an NHL article. You can use promo code FTNWins. Save yourself a little bit of cash. You get picks from everybody across all sports, projections, tools. It's all there for you over at FTN Bets, FTN Fantasy, FTNDaily.com. Have a good one, guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Enjoy the football game, and we'll talk some better looking games this week. Have a good one.